On our 5th wedding anniversary, my husband admitted his secretary was 7 months pregnant. It's not my fault you can't have a child. So I spent the night packing my things. The next morning, when he found the signed divorce papers, he totally broke down. Can you imagine looking into the eyes of the man you vowed to spend forever with, only for him to casually confess his secretary was 7 months pregnant with his baby? That was just the beginning. What happened next wasn't about forgiveness, it was about cold, hard revenge. My name is Audrey Robinson, and just a few months ago, my entire world imploded. Zane, my husband of 5 years, sat across from me, his voice quiet, almost defeated. He'd had an affair on a business trip. His secretary, Maya, was 7 months pregnant. 7 months. My mind just stopped. It felt like the ground had vanished, leaving me floating in this empty, painful void. For 5 years, Zane and I had longed for a child. He was obsessed. Now, tears welled in his eyes, his voice cracking as he pleaded, "Addie, the baby is already 7 months along. Please, let her keep it." He paused, then added, softer, "I'll walk away with nothing. Just don't take this child away from her." I just nodded. My thoughts were too jumbled to even form a proper response. "Fine," I heard myself say, "let Maya have the baby." After all, this was the illegitimate child Zane had begged for, the one he'd wanted for so long. Who was I to stand in the way? You see, in our 5 years of marriage, we were never blessed. At first, I believed things couldn't be forced. If it was meant to happen, it would. Zane agreed, comforting me when I was disappointed. "Audrey, don't worry. Good things take time. Our little one is probably just waiting for the perfect moment." I truly believed him. He loved children, and his understanding meant everything. But then, the last 2 years, things shifted. My in-laws started putting on the pressure, and Zane's attitude changed. Little comments about my inability to conceive, innocent at first, gradually became pointed. Then, without even consulting me, he scheduled an appointment with a gynecologist. For me. He wanted me to get tested. Anger, pure and hot, surged through me. For the first time in our marriage, I truly lost my temper. "Zane," I remember saying, my voice shaking but firm, "if anything, you should be tested first. It's easier for men." I wasn't backing down. "If your results are normal, then I'll consider it. That's the fairest approach." His expression darkened. His eyes narrowed with indignation. "How could I possibly have a problem?" he spat, his tone sharp, defensive, almost indignant. "It's been 5 years. Are you really not going to consider our future? All I'm asking is for you to get tested. Don't you want to have a baby that belongs to us? One created from our love?" I froze. His words hit me like a physical slap. He'd flipped the script, accusing me of standing in the way. Like he was the one trying, the one sacrificing. For a moment, I didn't even recognize him. The gentle, rational, loving Zane I knew had vanished. The man in front of me was cold, calculating, and unexpectedly cruel. I took a deep breath, fighting for composure. "If you're willing to take the test," I said, calm but firm, "then I will too." But I refused to accept one-sided suspicion aimed solely at me. Zane's face fell, his shoulders slumping as if my words had crushed him. He spread his hands helplessly, his lips a thin line. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by an unsettling coldness. From that moment, everything changed. Zane started going on more business trips, each one longer. When he was home, he was distant, his mind elsewhere. My stories were met with half-hearted responses. Questions about his work were brushed off with a smile. We weren't even polite acquaintances anymore. Just two people bound by marriage, drifting so far apart, mutual respect felt like a distant memory. I foolishly convinced myself it was a phase, just work pressure. It would pass. Then came the day he returned from yet another trip. And for the first time in 5 years, I noticed something that made my heart stop. A tiny detail that screamed volumes: his wedding ring was gone. That ring. I had designed it myself. From the first sketch, 30 nights I spent, meticulously perfecting every curve, every facet. Crafting the very foundation of our future. In my professional life, I was known for skill and precision, but for my ring? I was a nervous apprentice. What if it wasn't perfect? Zane had been with me through it all, listening attentively, understanding the meaning, the love, the hope I poured into it. He knew the symbolism, the dreams. Suppressing the ache swelling in my chest, I forced a casual tone. "Where's your ring?" He glanced at his bare finger, as if noticing it for the first time. His face remained calm, unaffected. Then he chuckled softly. "Oh, I took it off swimming last time. Forgot to put it back on." I stared at him, my gaze fixed on his face. His words, so casual, so nonchalant, punched me in the gut. The emptiness in my chest deepened, a cold wave chilling every thought, every hope. This wasn't a phase. He hadn't forgotten. Zane, more than anyone, was a man of details. If he could forget something as significant as his wedding ring, it meant something deeper was missing. He'd stopped caring about what that ring represented. A wedding ring was never just a detail, it was a symbol, a promise. Now that promise felt fragile, almost non-existent. I swallowed hard, a lump in my throat threatening to choke me. I knew I had to talk to him. I needed to understand what had happened, what had made him treat our marriage like an obligation. What had gone wrong? But before I could gather the courage, before I could even bring it up, that night, the night I'd planned to share my excitement, I'd just learned the diamond ring I designed had become our company's best-selling piece. He spoke first. "Audrey," he said, his voice heavy, serious, but devoid of emotion. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat, my breath catching. The words that followed felt like a blade slicing through the air. "Leah, my secretary, she's pregnant. 7 months now. 7 months. My mind raced, doing the math. It was right after our argument about children. That's when things began to change, when Zane started to pull away, to drift. The signs had been there all along. If only I had been willing to see them. His apology followed, soft and hollow. "Audrey, I'm sorry. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. It was just that one time, I swear. I've never traveled alone with her since." His voice felt distant, muffled, drifting away. His words didn't reach me. Not really. They bounced off the walls of my mind but did nothing to ease the pain. My hands shook as I reached for my glass. The trembling was so intense, I didn't even realize it had slipped from my grasp. It crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Each shard a reflection of the brokenness inside me. As those fragments scattered, so did the last remnants of my breath. My throat tightened. My lungs felt squeezed, like someone had wrapped their hands around my neck, choking off the air. The weight of his words pressed down like a heavy, suffocating fog. 7 months pregnant. It meant the due date was only 2 or 3 months away. For Leah, an employee at his company. This wasn't something he'd just discovered. He'd known all along. And by not taking action, he'd silently allowed this child to grow to this stage. The betrayal felt even more unbearable, knowing he had chosen inaction, allowing the pregnancy to progress without regard for how much it would devastate me. "Leah tried to terminate the pregnancy last month," Zane's voice broke the silence, his words hanging like an uncomfortable confession. "She and I both wanted to correct our mistake, but it didn't work." He added, almost as if trying to make me understand, "Her body has been weak ever since." His voice was sincere, his eyes pleading for understanding, for absolution. He truly believed his desperate attempt to fix things would redeem him. But did he really think I was so utterly devoid of self-respect that I would accept another woman's child into my marriage? That I could just forgive him? A failed abortion. What a pathetic lie. His words were just an attempt to show he tried to make amends. But the truth was, the baby had been too strong, too determined to be erased. So now, here he was, left with no choice but to face the consequences. A flood of information hit me like a wave, threatening to drown me. But I forced myself to stay calm, to push my emotions down, to maintain control. I wouldn't let him see the turmoil inside. I wouldn't let him see how much this was destroying me. So, Zane, I asked, my voice steady, what exactly do you plan to do? When he saw I wasn't responding with immediate fury, he seemed to relax, thinking I was coming around to his reasoning. After a moment, he grabbed my hand, his grip eager, excited. Once she gives birth, we can raise the child as our own. He smiled as if offering me a gift. We'll give her a sum of money and send her far away from Oceanside City. His voice was full of certainty, as if this was a reasonable solution, a way to fix everything. This way, he won't have to suffer anymore. Doesn't that sound good? He asked, eyes hopeful, waiting for my agreement. At that moment, I felt my nails digging into my palms. The sharp sting of pain was barely enough to keep me from laughing aloud at the absurdity. It was almost too much to bear. Despite my best efforts, my eyes still burned with unshed tears. The injustice threatened to spill over. So, Zane, I said, my voice dangerously calm, you knew all along. You knew how much I struggled with infertility. You knew the emotional toll it took, the heartbreak each month when I couldn't conceive. And yet, when you accused me of being selfish for not bearing children, it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I couldn't. I paused, letting my words sink in. You knew all of this. And still, you chose to betray me, to put another woman's child into our lives, into our marriage. How ridiculous. How utterly pathetic. Zane, I continued, my voice now laced with a cold disgust, how did you become this person? Or perhaps, I never truly saw you for who you were. We'd been together for 8 years, since university. We were the perfect couple, the envy of our friends. He'd been shy, then passionate, devoted. I truly believed we were soulmates. 8 years, and he'd never faltered. Kindness, affection. Everyone, even my notoriously difficult father, adored him. We were the epitome of love. I believed that if anyone in this world was meant to be with me, it was Zane. But now, before me stood a man who expected me to accept the child he conceived in betrayal, and had the audacity to tell me it was all for my own good. Zane, when you wear a mask for too long, taking it off will tear your skin. Seeing you in this pathetic state now, it's nothing short of disgusting. There was no way in hell I would ever accept this. No way I'd be the woman who tolerated such a betrayal. No forgiveness in my heart. Not for this. Not for him. If Zane had persuaded Leia to have his child, there must have been a promise, a temptation. Just give birth, I could almost hear him whispering, and I'll divorce my wife. Now he was offering to let us raise the baby, as if that would somehow keep me in check, erase my resentment. He must have believed that by eliminating any threat I might pose, he could keep everything under control. Zane, you really have it all calculated, don't you? I asked, my voice chillingly soft. Every angle, every move, all designed to maintain your perfect little facade. Even now, you're trying to spin it as an unfortunate accident, a drunken mistake, an unexpected pregnancy, a failed abortion, just to protect your carefully crafted image from crumbling. How thoughtful of you. I didn't bother answering his question directly. There was no need. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate breath, wiping away the tear that had escaped. My fingers lingered for a moment. Then I looked up at him with a serene, almost gentle expression. Then make sure you properly compensate Leia for everything she's been through, I whispered, my voice calm but edged with something darker, something he couldn't quite read. Zane froze. His expression faltered for a second. But then, seeing my controlled demeanor, his tense features relaxed. He smiled, a smile as rehearsed as his every other move. He stepped closer, wrapping me in a familiar embrace. But beneath it, I felt something cold. "Audrey," he murmured, his voice low and soothing, "don't overthink this. That baby is ours. Thank you for supporting my decision." I responded, my voice quiet, almost too agreeable. But inside, everything was shifting. My heart felt like it was sinking into something deeper, something colder. I wasn't just supporting his decision. I was quietly plotting my own. A few days later, I arranged a full medical examination. I kept it to myself. No need to tell anyone. Not Zane, not anyone. I didn't need their approval or interference. I needed answers. A week later, the results came in. The truth was right there, printed on the page. Every indicator was perfectly normal. No sign of infertility, no issues with conception. As I held the test results, a quiet relief washed over me, quickly overshadowed by a heavy realization. This could only mean one thing. There was a very high chance that the child in Leia's womb wasn't Zane's at all. I stared at the paper, the weight of it sinking in. 5 years of marriage, and we had never conceived. Yet they had succeeded on the very first try. The irony was almost laughable. What were they supposed to be? Two perfectly matched opposites, destined to create life? It seemed like a cruel joke. My mind wandered back to Zane's reaction when I asked him to get tested. So confident, so sure he couldn't be the problem. Almost like he was hiding something. A secret buried deep. "If you want a child so badly, Zane," I thought, my gaze hardening, "so badly that you'd betray our marriage, abandon every ounce of morality, and deceive everyone around you, then fine. I'll give you what you want. And I'll make sure you get exactly what you deserve." Later, Leia came looking for me. I was sitting at a cafe downstairs, surrounded by scattered papers, postnuptial property agreements. The weight of the paperwork was a constant reminder of the mess Zane had created. But there was no turning back now. After Zane's initial confession, we had spoken once more. I told him that while I would consider his proposal, I couldn't just overlook the betrayal. It was too much, too sudden to just accept. I could still see the guilt in his eyes, the regret, the shame. "Audrey, I was wrong," he'd pleaded, his voice cracking. "If you can forgive me, I'll do anything." I'd looked at him calmly, my heart pounding. I could feel the fragility of the moment, but I refused to show it. Right now, I feel incredibly insecure. But because I truly love you, I'm willing to trust you one more time. Zane, looking like he'd been given a second chance, swore with utmost sincerity, "Audrey, I will never betray you again." But inside, I knew I had to take control. I no longer trusted him. I wasn't sure I ever would again. But something deeper was driving me now, something beyond forgiveness, something I would see through to the end. I nodded, feigning reassurance. Then, as if an idea just struck me, I suggested, "Zane, if you truly want to ease my worries, how about transferring our jointly owned fixed assets to my name?" The words hung in the air. I watched his expression stiffen, a flicker of hesitation. But I didn't give him time to react. I pressed on, determined. I genuinely want to continue our life together. That's why I'm only asking for this arrangement, for peace of mind. I paused, my voice steady. If I truly wanted to leave you, I could just file for divorce. It's not like I'm trapped here. We've been together for 8 years. I can't just let go that easily. I will accept this child and raise them as my own. I'm willing to give you another chance. As the words left my lips, my voice trembled slightly, betraying the raw emotion I tried so hard to suppress. A single tear slipped down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it away, my composure faltering for a moment. Zane, who had initially hesitated, fell silent. The room grew heavy with tension. His gaze fixed on the floor, his mind at war. But eventually, after a long pause, he spoke. He chose to believe in the woman he'd spent 8 years with, the obedient, reasonable one. He believed I couldn't possibly turn the tables. Everything was still under his control. Oh, how arrogant he was. A week later, Zane transferred all our fixed assets into my name. The documents were officially notarized. He did it partly out of guilt, but mostly to keep me from leaving. He was afraid. Afraid that if I realized too soon I might be cast aside, I'd do something drastic. So, with this gesture, he tried to placate me, to keep me from making any decisions he couldn't control. When Leia showed up today at the cafe, I knew this moment had come. I deliberately slowed my movements, gathering my paperwork, ensuring the notarized documents were left in plain sight on the table. I wanted her to see them, to feel the weight of what Zane had just done. She sat across from me, her expression neutral at first. But as soon as her eyes landed on the papers, her face tightened. The change was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. Her entire demeanor darkened instantly. "Zane gave you all the properties?" she asked, her tone laced with barely concealed anger, her eyes narrowing. I smiled, my expression calm, almost amused. I wanted to show her I was unshaken, that her anger couldn't touch me. "It's just some compensation, that's all," I replied coolly. "Why are you here, Leia?" For a moment, Leia said nothing. She absently ran her heavily adorned fingers over her round belly, her gaze flickering toward me as if trying to gauge my reaction. But when she saw how unbothered I was, disappointment flickered in her eyes. Her fingers tightened slightly around her cup, and she seemed to deflate, the confident air slipping away. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of silence, she spoke, her voice soft but deliberate. "Sister, I came here today to apologize to you." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden shift in tone. Leia's apology felt almost too calculated, too measured. I remained silent, letting her continue. "I've been pregnant with Zane's child for 7 months now," she said, her voice timid, but her hand never stopped caressing her belly in that deliberate, almost provocative motion. I gave her a small nod, my face betraying nothing. I calmly lifted my coffee cup and took a sip. "He already told me," I said, my voice smooth. "Since you're 7 months along, you should focus on taking care of yourself." I let the silence stretch, then added, "If it's a Robinson child, I'm sure Zane's parents will be very welcoming." I deliberately emphasized a Robinson child and lifted my gaze to observe her reaction. For a split second, Leia stiffened, her fingers tightening around her cup, her knuckles whitening. It was fleeting, quickly masked. She recovered quickly, her eyes lowering slightly. "Of course, it's Zane's child." "What else would it be?" she replied, her voice firm, though a slight tremor of uncertainty lingered. I placed my cup down, nodding slightly, acknowledging her confidence, or rather, the lack of it. She sounded so certain, her expression steady once more. Yet, deep down, I knew the truth. After sneaking around with Zane for so long, she must have assumed there was no doubt. How unfortunate for her that Zane turned out to be so unreliable. Not long after my meeting with Leia, I received a message from my friend Elise. A while ago, I'd asked her to look into something. Elise worked at the company headquarters, Zane was CEO of a subsidiary. Information about his branch wasn't hard for her to get. She'd been making discreet inquiries. After a few days of careful digging, she uncovered something that made my blood run cold. 8 months ago, Leia had a boyfriend. Many people had seen him picking Leia up from work. But for some reason, they broke up. Not long after, Leia resigned, citing personal reasons. Straightforward departure, right? But whispers spread, her resignation wasn't just personal, she was pregnant. Naturally, everyone assumed it was Zane's. The rumors ran rampant, and a sinking feeling formed in my stomach. Elise, ever perceptive, hesitated. "Audrey, why are you looking into this?" Her voice was gentle, laced with concern. I saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes. She'd already pieced it together. A wife investigating her husband's pregnant former secretary. What other reason could there be? Seeing the heaviness in my expression, Elise sighed quietly, a sound carrying the weight of unspoken words. Audrey, she said softly, if you need anything, anything at all, just tell me. I'll do whatever I can. Her words were a lifeline, a soft tether pulling me back from my spiraling thoughts. After everything, I thought I was numb to emotion. Yet, her sincerity cut through the cold shell I'd built. A small flicker of warmth in a dark room. Thank you, Elise, I said, my voice softer, almost tentative. I do need your help. Elise's hand gently settled over mine, her touch reassuring. Tell me what you need, she said, her tone filled with quiet strength. I'll do my best. I lowered my gaze, fingers tracing my wedding ring. The cold metal felt heavy, a constant reminder. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Can you find out more about Leia's ex-boyfriend? I asked, barely a whisper. Elise didn't hesitate. For someone so socially adept, tracking down a person in Oceanside City's professional circles would be nothing. I could already imagine how easily she'd navigate that web of connections. That morning, after the new quarter's product development meeting, I suddenly felt unwell. I left the office early, needing to rest, to collect my thoughts. The tension in my chest was unbearable. As I stepped out of the elevator and walked towards my apartment, I was caught off guard by an unexpected sound. Voices. Raised voices. Drifting out from behind my door. The unmistakable sound of a heated argument, sharp and unnerving. I stopped dead, hand hovering over the smart lock keypad. The familiar click now felt distant. I strained to hear, and then I caught the first words. You actually put all the properties under Audrey's name? Leia's voice was high-pitched, shrill with desperation. Then what will I have left after marrying you? Inside, Zane was silent, but the tension was palpable. Hearing this, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at my lips. So, my carefully planted information had worked. Leia had taken the bait. She was upset about the prenuptial property agreements, just as I'd expected. Come on, Leia, Zane's voice cut through, laced with frustration. It's just some houses. I have other assets. A loud crash echoed from inside, followed by shattering porcelain. My heart skipped a beat. What was happening? Then came a bitter, mocking laugh from Leia. What do you think, Zane? I've been suffering through pregnancy for 10 months and I get nothing, while that woman does absolutely nothing and walks away with a dozen properties under your name? You think I'm an idiot? I pressed my hand to my lips, barely suppressing a laugh. For someone I once thought of as a master manipulator, Leia was surprisingly impatient. She still had leverage, still had the upper hand, but here she was throwing it all away in a fit of rage. It was almost childish. The argument escalated, words more frantic, desperate. Leia's voice cracked as she began to cry, louder and louder. Her sobs filled the space between the walls. Then, through the noise, I heard something that made my eyebrows shoot up. I'll abort this baby right now. Leia's voice trembled with raw emotion. I'll make sure you never have children again. I blinked, breath catching. Oh. That was a line she should never have crossed. If there was one thing Zane valued above all else, it was having a child. And just as I predicted, the air seemed to still. Everything went silent. Then, slap, a sharp slap rang through the room, so loud it seemed to echo in my chest. The unmistakable sound of a struggle followed. The bookshelf shifted, scraping against the floor, as if everything inside was in chaos. Then, just as abruptly, everything fell silent. Leia's cries, her protests, all of it stopped. The stillness was suffocating. My heart pounded as I stood frozen in the hallway. What had just happened? Enough, Leia. Zane's voice was as cold as ice. If you dare to get rid of this child, I will make sure your entire family suffers the consequences. I could almost picture his face, those once gentle eyes now sharp and merciless. Leia didn't utter another word. She knew Zane had the power to back up his threats. After that day, something subtle shifted in Zane's behavior toward me. He started coming home on time, avoiding unnecessary business trips, even giving me gifts again on special occasions, gestures long gone from our lives. At first, I couldn't help but notice the effort he was putting into maintaining an illusion of normalcy. I played along, feigning cooperation, though every part of me knew exactly what was happening. Zane had once planned to divorce me after the baby was born, then marry the young, beautiful Leia. But things had changed. After witnessing Leia's recent breakdowns and seeing how I had transformed into the picture of understanding and obedience, Zane was reconsidering. He was realizing maybe the easy solution wasn't the best one. His sudden shift in attitude meant he was genuinely planning to take the child, pay Leia off, and cut ties with her entirely, as if doing so would erase his mistakes and spare him any further consequences. But I knew that wasn't enough for me. While this outcome might seem to work in my favor, it wasn't the ending I truly desired. Not even close. As Leia's due date neared, I found myself encouraging Zane to visit her more often. It wasn't because I'd suddenly accepted the child. No, that wasn't it at all. I wanted him to invest more of his emotions and energy into this baby, to bind himself to it, so that when everything eventually fell apart, his disappointment would be that much more crushing. To my surprise, Zane seemed reluctant. Even with Leia so close to giving birth, he showed no interest in visiting her. His indifference spoke volumes. His disdain for her had grown so deep he couldn't even bring himself to be near her. "Darling," I said softly one evening, placing my hand gently over his as we sat on the couch. "Leia's child is our child, too." He glanced at me, frowning, and I continued, choosing my words carefully. "If I were the one visiting, she might feel uncomfortable. Our relationship is complicated. So, in this situation, you're the only one who can step up." Zane opened his mouth to respond, but I quickly added, "You should spend more time with them. It'll help you bond with the baby before he comes home to us." Zane hesitated, his brow furrowing as if wrestling with the idea. But after a moment, his expression softened, and he pulled me into his arms, his chin gently brushing my forehead, a fleeting gesture of affection. "You're still as understanding as ever, after all these years," he murmured, his words laden with a touch of sorrow. "If only we could have a child of our own, that would be wonderful." His voice cracked slightly, as if the thought of what we might have had, what we could have shared, was slipping further out of reach. There was a deep regret in his words, a genuine longing. But it only made me more aware of the gap between us. As I leaned against his shoulder, I felt a tension building in my chest, my expression darkening, my thoughts heavy with the truth. I could no longer ignore Zane. "I should thank the heavens for revealing your true nature to me. If I ever had a child with someone like you, it would be the greatest stain on my life." At 39 weeks pregnant, Leia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Inside the hospital room, Zane's parents' voices filled the air, their joyful chatter drowning out the newborn's cries. Their excitement spilled out into the hallway where I stood alone, leaning against the cold wall, my face calm, betraying none of the turmoil inside. I should have known. Zane's parents had likely been aware of this child's existence from the very beginning. From the start, they had conspired with Zane and Leia, turning a blind eye to the betrayal. And now they were here, celebrating the birth of a child whose origins they had chosen to ignore. As I stood there, an old memory surfaced, one from my wedding day. Kneeling before Zane's parents, offering them tea, as tradition dictated. Zane's mother had been overwhelmed with emotion. Her tears glistened, her voice trembled as she struggled for words. But now, listening to her laugh in the hospital room, her joy echoing down the hallway, I couldn't help but wonder, had all that emotion been real, or just a performance for my benefit? Friends and family had watched in awe, whispering, "This is the first time I've ever seen a mother-in-law cry out of sheer happiness when hearing her daughter-in-law call her mom for the first time." After we married, Zane's mother took pride in introducing me at every elite gathering in Oceanside City. "This is my daughter-in-law, Audrey. She's kind, intelligent, the lead designer at Starlight Jewelry. Zane is incredibly lucky to have married her." Back then, everyone believed it, including me. Everyone thought I had a near-perfect marriage, a successful and devoted husband, kind and loving in-laws. But looking at the situation now, what a cruel joke that was. Pushing those thoughts aside, I knocked on the door and stepped inside, placing the freshly made soup on the table. Just as I was about to turn and leave, Leia's voice stopped me. Seeing me pause, she turned to Zane's parents with a deliberately sweet and obedient smile. "Mom, Dad, could you step out for a moment? I have something to discuss with Audrey." Zane's parents hesitated, their expressions shifting uneasily. After a moment, they nodded and left, the awkwardness and worry in their eyes unmistakable. I understood their concern. They were afraid that if Leia and I were left alone, something unexpected might happen. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. How quickly the warmth of family could turn cold. As soon as the door clicked shut, Leia's gentle demeanor vanished. Her gaze sharpened into a cold, triumphant glare. "Audrey, you've already lost. Mom and Dad just told me they're ready to have Zane file for divorce. Did you really think he was going to take the child and raise it as yours? That was just a temporary excuse to pacify you. Now that the baby is safely born, you're no longer needed. Enjoy your last days as Mrs. Robinson while you still can." She spoke like a victor standing over the defeated. But her taunts barely stirred any emotion in me. Calmly, I ladled the soup into a bowl. The insulation was good, steam still curled upwards. I glanced up at Leia. Her complexion was dull, shallow. Her once youthful glow completely drained. Childbirth had aged her visibly and significantly. She was 3 years younger than me, yet now she looked older by at least 5. I didn't bother arguing. Instead, my gaze shifted to the baby in her arms. His skin was noticeably darker, almost unnaturally so. Zane had been fair-skinned since childhood. Leia, before her pregnancy, had always been pale and delicate. Yet this baby, if he got any darker, he might as well be from an entirely different lineage. I arched a brow slightly, then smirked, my voice deliberately taunting. "Oh, Leia, I hope you're not getting ahead of yourself. Brag all you want after you actually set foot in the Robinson household. Otherwise, you're just working hard to prepare my victory gown for me." My words struck a nerve. Leia's eyes filled with hatred, her entire expression twisting with malice. A sudden wave of unease crept over me. And sure enough, Leia's fingers suddenly tightened around the baby's tiny arm. A sharp pinch. In an instant, angry red marks bloomed on the delicate skin. The baby's cries filled the entire hospital room. Right on cue, Zane's parents burst back in, panic written all over their faces. Before I could even process what had happened, Leia's voice rang out, shaken, distressed, and dripping with accusation. "Mom, Dad, you have to stand up for us. Audrey said she wanted to see the baby, but the moment I looked away, she pinched him. Look, his arm is swollen." My in-laws immediately pushed past me, rushing to examine the child. The moment they saw the red marks, Zane's mother's expression darkened. The warmth she once had for me was completely gone. In its place, resentment and disappointment. I shook my head slightly, silently, denying the accusation. But I already knew the truth wouldn't matter. To them, between their daughter-in-law of many years and a mother who had just given birth, they would always believe that a mother would never harm her own child. As the baby's cries echoed, Zane's mother exhaled slowly, pausing before speaking in a low, measured tone. "Audrey, you've seen it yourself all these years, you still haven't been able to bear a child. Although we truly like you as our daughter-in-law, we cannot ignore certain pressures. Now that Leah has given birth to Zayn's son, we want to offer you some compensation. Even if you divorce Zayn, we will always be family." Hearing this, the tension in my heart finally eased. Unable to hold back, I let out a soft chuckle. Her grandson had just been born, and she wasted no time getting straight to the point. How typical. A family so hypocritical, so indifferent. I didn't bother responding to Zayn's mother's so-called words of comfort. Instead, I lifted the bowl of soup I had just poured and downed it in one go. "Mom, this fish soup, you taught me how to make it 4 years ago. I have always respected and cherished you. But today, this will be the last time I call you Mom. There's no need to talk about family anymore. Goodbye." 1 week later, Zayn came to me with the divorce papers, sooner than I had expected. I had deliberately provoked Leah during my hospital visit, intending to pressure her into pushing Zayn to divorce me as soon as possible. I needed him to feel the deepest guilt when negotiating our divorce, ensuring I received the maximum share of assets. Otherwise, with the way Zayn was growing increasingly frustrated and helpless toward Leah, I genuinely feared he might choose to keep the baby but discard the mother. Fortunately, Leah and Zayn's parents did not disappoint me. I looked up at Zayn, my face carrying the same familiar gentle smile. But he looked utterly exhausted. His usually well-groomed hair was unkempt, hanging messily over his forehead. Dark circles beneath his eyes were evident behind his gold-rimmed glasses. His entire demeanor exuded fatigue. Zayn clutched the divorce papers tightly, his gaze shifting between the document and me, his expression conflicted and pained. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Audrey, I'm sorry. I swear I never wanted to divorce you, but I had no choice. Leah is threatening me with the baby. My parents are siding with her, pressuring me endlessly, so I had no other option." He slowly pushed the divorce agreement toward me. Lowering my gaze, I focused on the asset division section. Since we had already notarized the property under my name, there was no dispute there: 15 properties across various locations and 7 luxury cars. As for Zayn's savings and company shares, he had written an 80-20 split, 80% to me, 20% to him. That genuinely surprised me. I had consulted a divorce lawyer beforehand. In cases where one spouse is at fault, they typically receive 10% to 20% less in the settlement. I had planned to contact my lawyer and fight for at least 70% if Zayn's offer was anything lower. But now, this arrangement saved me the trouble. Just as I picked up the pen to sign, Zayn suddenly grabbed my hand. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and his voice trembled with emotion. "Audrey, I know you've suffered during this time. I truly thought everything would go as I planned, but Leah has been threatening me every day. She says if we don't divorce, she'll jump off a building with the baby. I had no choice regarding the financial compensation. Don't worry, I will transfer everything to your name immediately. And in the future, if you don't have children of your own, you can treat our son as yours." A wave of disgust surged through me. I withdrew my hand from his grasp, my expression cold and indifferent. "There's no need for that, Mr. Robinson. From now on, take care of yourself." With that, I picked up the divorce papers and walked away without looking back. Zayn had no idea if I ever wanted a child, I would have one of my own. But as for him, that was no longer an option. Over the next 2 weeks, I sold off all the company shares Zayn had allocated to me at a high price. The profits were significant. As I stared at my bank account balance, unable to suppress a satisfied smile, I received a message from Ezra Sullivan. Ezra, Leah's ex-boyfriend. In fact, the week Leah gave birth, Elise had already tracked him down. But at the time, I chose not to meet him right away. I told Elise to wait until my divorce was finalized. Now that the company shares had been sold, the timing was perfect. When I finally met Ezra, I didn't bother with pleasantries. His appearance was rugged and unrefined, resembling someone from a remote countryside, a far cry from what I'd expected. I sat across from him and pulled a photograph from my bag. In it, Leah was holding a baby, standing alongside the Robinson family. Ezra glanced at the picture, but showed little reaction. He recognized Leah, but his response was indifferent. "We've already broken up. This has nothing to do with me." I let out a sigh, resisting the urge to roll my eyes at his obliviousness. Still, I kept my patience and nudged him further. "If we go by the timeline, Leah got pregnant around August of last year. At that time, were you absolutely certain you had already broken up? Or to put it more bluntly, are you sure you didn't sleep together after that?" Ezra's brows furrowed slightly. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought, sifting through his memories. Then realization dawned on him. "Wait, are you saying this child might be mine?" I gave him a firm nod. Ezra stared at me, stunned, before slowly lowering his gaze back to the photograph. He sat frozen for a long time, his fingers tightening around the edges of the picture as he examined it over and over again. Then, suddenly, as if something clicked, he pulled out his phone. He scrolled quickly through his screen before handing it to me. I looked down. A long list of hotel booking records filled the screen, most from the summer of last year, between July and September. The dates aligned almost perfectly with the periods when Zane and Leah had returned from their business trips to Oceanside City. So Leah had been keeping herself busy traveling with Zane for work, then coming back to meet up with Ezra. I methodically took screenshots of every page and saved them to my phone. Then, turning back to Ezra, I proposed a deal. "I can tell you the truth, but you have to promise not to mention my involvement." Ezra nodded without hesitation. "All right," I said. "That boy is yours, 100%. The man in this picture," I pointed to Zane, "he used to be my husband, but he has fertility issues. It's impossible for him to have gotten Leah pregnant." Of course, I wasn't actually 100% certain, but I needed Ezra's fury to work in my favor. The moment my words landed, bang, Ezra slammed his fist onto the table. The quiet, mild-mannered man before me was gone. His face twisted with rage, his entire demeanor turning aggressive. "Where are they?" The fury in his voice was unmistakable. I had heard that men from rural or traditional backgrounds took bloodlines and heirs very seriously. And seeing Ezra's explosive reaction, especially his visible shift in expression when I mentioned the boy, only confirmed those rumors. Without hesitation, I handed him the addresses of Leah's postpartum care center and Zane's company. Ezra gripped the paper so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He was clearly seething, barely keeping his emotions in check. Yet before storming off, he still managed to turn back and thank me. After all, if I hadn't revealed the truth, he might have never known he had a biological son, one that Leah had been using as her golden ticket to wealth. The next time I heard about Leah and Zane, it was from the local trending news. I clicked on the leaked report, and there he was, Ezra, standing in front of Zane's company headquarters and the postpartum center, holding up a massive banner. The words written across it were bold and impossible to miss: "Company CEO Zane and my ex-girlfriend Leah, return my son to me." Seeing this, I couldn't hold back my laughter. I scrolled down to the comments section. Over 1,000 comments had already flooded in. Most said the same thing: just get a paternity test. Nothing else matters. Honestly though, that kid looks nothing like the CEO. He's way too dark-skinned. No tests needed. We already know who the real father is. Apart from the paternity test, others began to speak out, saying, Zane just divorced his ex-wife in July, and the child was already born by then. It's clear the affair is undeniable. This CEO looks so familiar. Why do I feel like I've seen him at a urology clinic? At this point, my fingers froze. A urology clinic. If what this netizen was saying was true, Zane must have known from the start that his fertility was an issue. Yet, he still went on to make all these despicable choices. The public uproar quickly gained momentum, and the trending topic shot to the top of the local news charts in Oceanside City overnight. The company's stock price plummeted. I looked at the substantial sum of money in my bank account and couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This was exactly why I hadn't contacted Ezra before the wedding. If Ezra found out, he would have immediately caused a scene. And if I had divorced Zane afterward, the shares I would have received would have already lost much of their value. But now, after selling the shares at a high price, I could finally let Ezra make a fuss. This was the best course of action. The trending topic stayed at the top of the local news for an entire day and night before finally losing some of its heat. At that point, Elise came to me with the latest gossip. "Did you hear, Audrey? The child really isn't Zane's. Yesterday's drama caused such a stir. So many people went to that maternity center just to watch the chaos. Zane must be completely furious, insisting on having the paternity test done. Word is the secretary almost jumped out of the maternity center window to avoid the test. And when the results came in, the Robinson family looked absolutely pale." As Elise spoke, she pulled out her phone and opened a group chat called Oceanside City Gossip. There were dozens of videos shared. One video, lasting about 20 minutes, showed Leah, disheveled and wearing a hospital gown, kneeling and grabbing Zane's sleeve, begging him not to conduct the paternity test in front of everyone. Zane kicked her away, even stepping on her stomach a few times, his eyes bloodshot. He used the foulest language to insult her. Zane's parents just stood by silently, wiping away their tears. About 5 minutes later, Leah suddenly rushed toward the window as if she'd lost her mind. She tried to jump from the 8th floor. It was only with the help of onlookers that she was stopped. But she kept shouting, "You useless man. No wonder you and Audrey couldn't have a child after 5 years. You blame me for cheating, but you're the one who's broken. Pathetic. Which woman would ever have a child with you, Zane? You'll never have heirs in this life." Elise laughed uncontrollably, leaning closer. There's another video where Zane receives the paternity test results. He holds the report, his face dark and grim. Then he tears it to shreds, furiously punching the hospital wall. The punch causes his hand to bleed. Meanwhile, Leah, sitting nearby, looks like a woman in her 40s or 50s. Her eyes vacant, her skin a dull yellow. In her early 20s, her face had already begun to sag beyond recognition. She stares blankly out the window, completely indifferent to the noisy crowd of onlookers and reporters. Elise snickered, mocking. Now Zane's been cuckolded, his reputation in ruins. Double trouble for him. Leah's dreams of entering high society are shattered. And now everyone's mocking her. Hilarious. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel a sense of joy inside. In just a few months, I had gone from being the one betrayed and discarded by the Robinsons to now holding the majority of the Robinson family's assets. And I had also gotten rid of a husband who was nothing but a useless, infertile man. With that thought in mind, I smiled and put my arm around Elise. "Come on, sis. Let's go on a trip to Northern Europe to celebrate." After all, the money I had now was enough for several lifetimes of spending. By the time Elise and I returned from our trip abroad, Oceanside City had already entered its second spring of the year. Those wild days in Northern Europe had finally allowed me to unwind, to release the tension I had been carrying since the start of the year. Looking back, I can't help but shudder at how vulnerable I was. Facing the schemes of the Robinson family and Leah alone, one wrong move could have trapped me in an endless quagmire. But thankfully, I managed to hold my ground. However, so much had happened in Oceanside City during the 5 months we were away. Zane, caught up in his affair before the wedding, was fired from his job at the Oceanside Corporation for mishandling personal matters. The scandal destroyed his career, and the industry blacklisted him completely. In his fury, Zane directed all his anger at Leah. Neighbors of the Robinsons reported seeing Leah battered and bruised going out for groceries, late into the night. The sounds of domestic violence echoed from their home. During our trip, I had received a call from Zane's mother. Her voice was trembling, full of tears, as she pleaded for help, asking if I could send some money to assist them. She told me Zayn couldn't handle the blow and had been drinking and wandering aimlessly. Recently, he'd been diagnosed with a difficult-to-treat illness. Leia too had suffered a mental breakdown and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Now both of them needed money for treatment, but the Robinson family had already been drained dry and couldn't afford it. I listened to Zayn's mother's cries, but I didn't offer much of a response. I gave a few short answers and ended the call. To be honest, by the time I heard this, I had no sympathy for them. Instead, I found a strange sense of satisfaction in their misery, almost like a form of entertainment. Zayn and Leia's fate was what they deserved. Whatever they went through next, I no longer cared. I would only focus on myself. In the following days, I turned my attention to designing my new quarterly collection, a starry-themed ring for single women. When I was married, my designs focused mainly on wedding bands. But now that I was divorced, my focus had shifted. This change in my identity brought new thoughts and inspirations. I wanted to encourage other women facing difficulties in marriage or relationships to be brave and embrace their independence. A single woman's ring is a great idea, but why the star theme? One colleague asked. Stars always accompany the moon. It doesn't seem to reflect the core concept of female independence and self-sufficiency. I almost found myself at a loss for words. But then suddenly, I remembered the sky full of stars I had seen in Northern Europe. Actually, I began, my voice clear and confident, most stars are independent celestial bodies, shining with their own light. They don't rely on the moon to exist. Just like you and me, we are independent individuals. We don't need to rely on anyone or any relationship to define our existence. My words seemed to resonate. The room fell silent for a moment as my words hung in the air. I could see the faces around the table, some with a hint of surprise, others with new understanding. The atmosphere shifted from doubt to curiosity, and I could feel the energy of the meeting changing. One of the senior designers, a woman who had been skeptical at first, leaned forward. I see what you're saying now. It's not just about the star design. It's about empowerment. It's about showing women that they can shine on their own without needing anyone else to validate their worth. She smiled, her tone warmer than before. Encouraged, I continued, my voice steady and confident. Exactly. This ring isn't just a piece of jewelry. It's a symbol for every woman who has walked away from a relationship that didn't serve her. For every woman who has chosen herself over societal expectations. This ring will be a reminder that she is enough on her own. The others nodded, some taking notes, others exchanging glances that spoke volumes. I could tell that the idea was finally beginning to take hold. The theme wasn't just a design concept. It was a message. A message I was passionate about, something that came from my own journey, my own transformation. The rest of the meeting went smoothly. Ideas flowed more freely, and everyone seemed energized by the new direction. As we wrapped up, the design team was already brainstorming ways to bring the starry-themed ring to life. And I could sense a real excitement in the air. As I walked out of the meeting room, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about the designs anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, something that could make a difference in the lives of women. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly on the right path. I had started this journey unsure of myself, unsure of my future. But now, with each step I took, I was becoming the woman I had always wanted to be. Strong, independent, and unapologetically myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest design of all. So, what do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have chosen forgiveness, or would you have walked the same path I did? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.